In today's story, we're going to be taking a look at a cryptid that is found in Native American lore, but has been seen as recently as 2002. Hope you enjoy it. Welcome back to Gam Catches Up. Thank you again for tuning in and watching my videos. Do me a favor, hit like, share the video with a friend, subscribe to the channel, it helps me grow my audience, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss my uploads. Okay, so let's get into it. So today's cryptid, as I said in the intro, was found in Native American lore. Almost every Native American tribe in North America has actually claimed an encounter with them. They're these giant birds, and they gave them the nickname Thunderbird because the sound of their beating wings often sounded like rolling thunder to the people below, and their eyes supposedly flashed like lightning. Some tribes reported that these giant birds would actually just slaughter and torture humans, like fly in, pick them up, and play with their prey. Other tribes actually said that these giant birds were known to slay local monsters or even aid lost hunters in finding their way back to the tribe. Now, descriptions range on what the actual birds look like. Some people have described them looking as pterodactyls or pteranodons. Other people have them looking kind of like giant condors, eagles, and even buzzards. But regardless, collectively, they're all grouped into one category known as Thunderbirds. The Thunderbird might have gone down as just another Native American myth, if not for reported sightings and attacks throughout the past 200 years. Our first actual tale takes place in 1868 in Tippah County, Missouri. Some school children and their teacher were outside playing during recess when out of nowhere a giant Thunderbird came swooping down and picked up 8-year-old Jemmy Kenny and carried him off into the sky. The boy fought as hard as he could and thrashed against the talons that were dug into his shoulders, and it caused the bird to falter a little bit in the sky and then release him. The release from the bird's talons was from such a height that the impact of him hitting the ground actually killed poor Jemmy. But even if he had survived that impact with the ground, his teacher reported that the boy would have died from blood loss because the creature's talons had buried themselves so deep into the boy's shoulder that it almost severed his arm. Our next two tales, which I'll get into why it's not that reliable, was in 1886. There was this group of ranchers in Tombstone, Arizona, and they claimed they actually shot and killed a Thunderbird. They then took the bird, they pinned the dead creature to the side of a barn and measured its wingspan, and the wingspan measured about 35 feet. There were photographs taken and allegedly published in the Tombstone Epitaph, but all records and evidence of this have mysteriously disappeared, and the photograph has not been located by even the most thorough of cryptozoological researchers. Then, in 1890, 4 years later in Tombstone, Arizona, there were two cowhands. They were out riding, and they discovered a wounded and struggling Thunderbird in the desert just outside of Tombstone. Supposedly, the bird's wingspan exceeded 185 feet, and its mouth was filled with enormous and deadly teeth. In a panic, they shot the bird a bunch of times, and then the pair followed the creature as it floundered until it actually died. They made sure it was dead and then supposedly measured and examined the creature and severed off a portion of its wing and took it with them. This too was reported by the Tombstone Epitaph, and they reported that the men planned to return for the rest of the body, but again the story just ends with the paper's brief article about the amazing find. And the wingtip that they cut off has been lost for decades. Before I go on to the next sighting, I should say this. The Tombstone Epitaph was known for reporting just folklore, and a lot of made up stories. So this doesn't completely discredit what these two sightings were, but there's a good possibility they never happened, which is unfortunate. Our stories then jump from the 1800s to the 1900s, specifically April of 1948, and there was giant birds that just appeared over Alton, Caledonia, Richmond Heights, Overland, and Freeport, Illinois. Multiple people spotted the Thunderbirds trying to pick up and carry away livestock and pets. Those people included an Army colonel, farmers, truck drivers, police officers, a chiropractor, and instructors from an aeronautics school. Then, in May 1961, a pilot was flying above the Hudson Valley. He spotted what he believed was a Thunderbird and was so frightened that he almost lost control of the plane and crashed. Some people speculate that Thunderbirds are actually responsible for the crash of a United Airlines plane in November 1962. When they found the wreckage, it was in a wooded area of Maryland, and rescuers found no survivors, but they did stumble upon a mass of bloody feathers, and the investigators also noted huge gouges and slash marks on the plane, especially near the tail assembly. Our next sighting occurred on January 1st, 1976. Young Tracy Lawson, 11, and her cousin Jackie Davies, 14, they were playing in Tracy's backyard, 5 miles south of Harlingen in the Texas Rio Grande Valley. Just behind her yard, there was a plowed field, and they noticed some kind of unusual object that was about 100 yards away near a pit bordering an irrigation canal. Tracy, seeing this thing out there, but not being able to make it out, went inside her house and grabbed her binoculars, and she observed a horrible-looking black bird of extraordinary size, over 5 feet tall. According to her, its wings were folded around its body, and the bird was staring at the girls through these big, dark red eyes attached to a gray gorilla-like face. She said its head was bald and it had a beak at least 6 inches long, and it made a loud, shrill hawk scream type sound. The Thunderbird, or whatever it was, then took flight, and they lost sight of it for a few moments, and then it reappeared on the northeast corner of the property. Its head was poking about in a small clump of trees. The girls, they ran inside and told Tracy's mother and her father what they had just seen, and neither of the parents believed them. That was until the next day, when Jackie's stepfather, Tom Walden, found strange tracks. He found these 3-toed, 8 inches across, square at the head prints from something that were pressed 1.5 inches into hard ground. Tracy's father, Stan Lawson, who weighed 170 pounds, tried to make a print as deep as the claw marks, but found that he couldn't even dent the ground, no matter how hard he pressed down. Stan also noticed how oddly the family dog was acting. It was cowering inside its doghouse all day, and the only time it even would leave the doghouse was when it would come out for its dinner. And then it would immediately bolt back into the doghouse and had to be dragged out. Later that night, Lawson thought he heard large wings scraping across the bedroom window, but whatever caused the sound, it didn't leave any trace. Less than a week later, on January 7th, in the nearby town of Brownsville, Alvarico Guajardo heard something hit his house trailer. Kind of creeped him out a little bit, so he snuck outside, got into his station wagon, and he drove to the south end of his trailer. His headlights caught something that he swears, quote, was something from another planet. What he saw, according to him, was a large bird, 4 feet tall, with black wings, a long beak, and bat-like wings lying on the ground. When the headlights hit it, it rose up immediately, and its blazing red eyes, he said, were the size of silver dollars. They focused directly on him. For the next 2 or 3 minutes, he said he was literally paralyzed with fear. And all the while this was going on, this horrible sounding noise emanated from the bird's throat. Eventually, the creature backed away and was lost in the darkness. A week later, in the valley town of Raymondville, Armando Grimaldo sat out in back of his mother-in-law's house smoking a cigarette when he said he heard a sound like the flapping of bat-like wings and a funny kind of whistling. He got up to investigate, and he's quoted as saying, "I felt something grab me, something with big claws. I looked back and saw it and started running. It was a creature with a monkey-like face and leathery skin." His account of the bird is a little bit different, though, because he said it did have large, bright red eyes, but it didn't have a beak. He ran for safety under a nearby tree, and he felt his pants, coat, and shirt being torn from his body. The creature, unable to drag him out, breathing heavily, then flew off into the night. This brings us to one of our most documented cases of Thunderbirds. On July 25, 1977, a 10-year-old named Marlon Lowe was playing outside his family home in Lawndale, Illinois, along open fields near Kickapoo Creek. Two giant birds passed over him when suddenly, out of nowhere, one swooped down and grabbed the boy and started to carry him away. Seeing this, Marlon's mother, Ruth, came running to her son's rescue, screaming and yelling and swinging at the birds, and the bird carried him about 30 feet and then dropped him. The whole attack occurred in front of 7 witnesses, all of whom described exactly the same thing. 2 huge coal-black birds, long white ringed necks, long curled beaks, and a wingspan of 10 or more feet. Jerry Coleman of Decanter, Illinois, was able to interview Marlon and his parents, Jake and Ruth Lowe, within hours of this attack. In a follow-up interview 19 years later, Jerry Coleman was able to speak with Marlon and his mother again. Ruth Lowe would go on to say in that interview, "I'll always remember how that huge thing was bending its white ringed neck. It seemed to be trying to peck at Marlon as it was flying away." Even though Ruth compared the size of the bird to an ostrich, she said it looked more like a condor. After the attack, Ruth spent many hours in the library trying to identify the bird and didn't have any success. Ruth would go on to say she completely rejected a local sheriff's speculation that it had been no more than a turkey vulture. She said, quote, "I was standing at the door and all I saw was Marlon's feet dangling in the air. There just aren't any birds around here that could lift him up like that." More sightings that occurred in late July, early August in locations throughout central and southern Illinois, but public ridicule had set in and people were less than forthcoming about their sightings. Most witnesses were afraid of being mocked or teased, so they didn't even bother. The final sightings that I could find records on actually occurred in 2001 and 2002. In June 2001, in Mercer County, Pennsylvania, 2 neighbors spotted a flying object that at first glance looked like a twin-prop or microlight aircraft. After watching the creature soar through the sky, it was clear from the wing movement, and it had a feathered body, that this was no plane, but actually a living animal, about 5 feet long with a 15-foot wingspan. The creature landed in a nearby tree and perched on it, and the tree severely bent under the great mass of its body. After about 15 minutes of resting, it took off and headed south, and witnesses agreed it was the largest bird they had ever seen. The bird reappeared that July in Erie County, Pennsylvania. It was described as being dark gray with little or no neck and a circle of black on its throat. Its beak was very thin and long, about a foot in length, the report went on, and it had a wingspan between 15 and 17 feet. 2 months later, in September 2001, the creature reappeared over Route 119 near South Greensburg, Pennsylvania in Westmoreland County. A young man in his late teens heard a sound resembling the flapping of a flag in a windstorm. He looked up and saw it beating its enormous wings in a slow and menacing way as it glided past the big rigs on the road. According to him, it had a wingspan of somewhere between 10 and 15 feet, head about a yard long, and such vast bulk that when it landed on a nearby tree, the tree nearly broke. Then, in 2002, according to a report that has since appeared on many websites devoted to cryptozoology, a pair of these birds appeared in late June between Tunkhannock and Nicholson in Wyoming County. They were said to be too big to be herons and with legs too short to be those of a crane. These birds perched a while on the top of a tall evergreen tree. Their wings were wider than the span of the branches and had a bat-like appearance. The 2 family members who saw these birds thought they resembled a black cormorant but scaled up to enormous size. And that's the last tale I could find about Thunderbirds. Now, unfortunately, where the Thunderbirds are concerned, there's been no photographs taken, no video taken. It's just basically these sightings, these incidents that were reported by multiple different people over the years. So what do you guys think? Are these people just having a hallucination and seeing like turkey vultures that they think are ginormous and they're really not that big? Do you think there's something left over from a prehistoric age like a pterodactyl? Maybe they're just giant birds that have existed in nature and stay away from humans for the most part. Let me know in the comments section. Me personally, I would love to believe that we have a bird out there that's like the eagles from Lord of the Rings that you could ride on or be carried away by. But at the same point in time, that would also be very terrifying. If you've ever seen a hawk or an eagle come in and pick a fish out of the water or a snake off the ground and fly away with it, just imagine it's you that this thing swoops down and grabs. You barely got a fighting chance. So anyway, that's today's video, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please do me a favor. Give me a like. Share this video with a friend that would probably appreciate it. Subscribe to the channel. I always have more content coming out. And hit the notification bell to let you know when I post new stuff. Until next time, I'm Gam, and I'll be seeing you.